Welcome to episode 6 of the Jibs Podcast. Today, we talk about community development.
It's just about getting up and doing it and finding the time, finding the people and making it happen.
You take control and you say, okay, this needs to be done, and you do it.
And you're never ready to start a business. You either do it or you don't.
Welcome to the Jibs Podcast, showcasing Detroit's movers and shakers, bringing you stories that reveal the gusto and grit that's long defined the city and its people. Together, we'll uncover the history and direction of the Motor City, one voice at a time. This is the Jibs Podcast with Jibran Ahmed.
Hey guys, welcome to the 6th episode of the Jibs Podcast. I am here with Chris Lambert, the CEO and founder of Life Remodeled. This is really exciting. Life Remodeled has been doing some amazing work for the past couple of years in Detroit. So Chris, can you kind of introduce who you are, where you're from, your background, and what Life Remodeled is?
Yeah, well, let me start by saying I've known you for a little while, and I didn't know the nickname was the Jibs. So,
Jibs, yeah.
That's pretty sweet. But, so my name is Chris Lambert, and I lead this nonprofit here in Detroit called Life Remodeled. So let me start with what we do, who we are. We're a Detroit-based nonprofit. Our tagline is we remodel lives one neighborhood at a time. And the way we do that is every year we invest in one Detroit neighborhood. We do 3 things each year. Number 1, we renovate a community asset. Number 2, we repair owner-occupied homes. And number 3, we mobilize 10,000 people in 6 days to clean up 300 city blocks. And all of that makes a pretty significant impact on physical structures and spaces, but the real mission is about the people transformation that takes place in the process. So the way we say our mission statement is that we exist to bridge people across divides in order to help transform each other's lives. So if you look at this neighborhood in particular, right, we believe that for this neighborhood to be sustainable, there need to be ongoing relationships that represent a wide variety of sectors where people are working together for the long haul. And it's something where it's not a charity that's one way, where maybe those who have resources are giving to those who lack resources, but it's really an opportunity for everybody to become better human beings in the process. And so that's the journey that I'm on personally, is to try to become a better person each and every day, and opportunities of interacting with people like you and others help do that.
What are some of the things that you've done for the past couple of years to really embody that mission? Sure.
So we've worked in Cody, a Rouge neighborhood in 2014, then Osborne, then Denby, and now we're in the neighborhood surrounding Central High School. And each of those projects has had some similarities, and then there's some real unique differences to each one, because obviously every neighborhood in Detroit has its own strengths, its own stories, its own opportunities, and areas for improvement. So at Cody High School, we ended up doing substantial renovations to the building there. We built a $1.2 million synthetic football field. Cody hadn't had a home field in 6 seasons. They played every game away, including homecoming. I don't know how you do that. We also built a medical simulation lab where kids can learn to become certified nursing assistants, EMTs, and there's also the first and only firefighter academy in any Detroit high school. And then, of course, we did our 6-day project in that neighborhood where we removed blight on over 300 city blocks with over 10,000 people. And we did some other work at Cody, but at Osborne, the biggest project we did was we re-roofed the building. When it rained outside, it literally poured in the building. Kids were getting rained on their way to class. I honestly didn't believe it until I saw it. And when I saw it, it cut me to the bone, because I realized this would never happen north of 8 Mile. People just wouldn't allow it. It'd be all over the news. And then I realized, parents had been complaining about this for years, but for whatever reason, those who could get it done didn't get it done. And now I'm excited to say, the district's under new leadership and a locally elected school board, and I'm excited about the future, and we want to be a part of helping the district to create more educational opportunities for kids. And so that's why we are where we are right now, embarking on the largest project we've ever undertaken.
Yeah. So that's all very transformative work, but all of that obviously has come from somewhere and from some motivation that drives you. So Chris, you as a person, How did you start Life Remodeled, and why did you start?
Yeah, so let me tell you my story in a few minutes here, but I'll just give a disclaimer to everyone that my story is a very spiritual one. I'm not sure where everybody obviously is coming from in regards to spirituality. And also I want to be real clear that Life Remodeled is not a religious organization. It's an organization for everyone, no matter what your beliefs may be or may not be. But it's impossible for me to tell my story without talking about spirituality. So I was raised in a very small town in northern Indiana. And when I say small town, I mean we didn't have a four-way stoplight until I was in middle school. And it was such a big deal that the town decided to build a gas station and name it Stop and Go. All right, this was quite a day for our town. And had great parents who were very nurturing on self-esteem and whatnot. But when it came to religion or spirituality, they would take us to church about half the year because they felt like it was the right thing to do. They didn't talk about God in our home or the person of Jesus in particular. But for me, as far back as I could possibly remember, for some reason, I was this really passionate kid about God. Now that continued up until when I was in 8th grade, I became known as Lambert, that's my last name, Lambert the Jesus Freak, all right? Because I was the kid who tried to convert everybody in school to Jesus, and I obviously was not successful at that, but I was really proud of that title at the time. Well, that kept going up until about when I turned 16, my sophomore year. And I hit a growth spurt, and I became kind of a big fish in a small pond in my little high school of 1,100 kids. And I did well at athletics and started to look around at my friends who were not following God, and I started thinking to myself, wow, they're having a lot more fun than me in my dorky little youth group, so maybe I'm going to become a little bit more like them without jumping off the deep end. And this is where the story gets ridiculous. So at 16, I decided for the first time in my life, I was going to start cussing.
Ooh.
I know. I jumped in big, and I'm a very intentional person. And I remember driving down a country road in my Jeep Wagoneer, and I put down my visor while I was driving. I looked up, I said, shit. Can you say that on the Jibs show? I don't know. I didn't know. I didn't ask. I didn't even ask permission. And so I'm an all or nothing kind of person as well. I go to school the next day, and every third word's the F word, mother, this, and son of a, and everybody's jaw drops, and they're laughing. They're like, what the hell happened to Lambert, the Jesus Freak? So they're laughing, I'm laughing, and of course that's a whole lot of fun for about 10 minutes. Then that gets old, and the next thing I decided I was going to start doing would be dating girls and all that comes along with that for a teenage guy who doesn't have his priorities straight. You can fill in the blanks. Then eventually, to mix it up a little more, I started drinking, and then I started using various drugs. So in 1999, I graduated high school, went to Indiana University to study business and get ready to go to law school and become a real estate developer. And while at IU, I joined the largest fraternity on campus so I could have more of everything that I was looking for. And for 6 years of my life, from the ages of 16 to 22, I was living it up. I was having a blast, and life was going great, or so I thought. But there would be nights when I would lie in bed and I would think to myself, man, I gotta be missing out on something because this is not really doing what I expected it to do for me. So my solution to that was just to do more of all the above, right? Whatever I thought would make me happy. My junior year, I decided to move to Australia and study overseas for a semester, for 6 months. And while I was there, I had this radical spiritual encounter that changed the trajectory of my life. So a couple things happened. One, I began to travel around to various countries, Southeast Asia, the Pacific Rim, and I realized the world is a very big place. And I'm just this little itty bitty speck of dust on the planet, and that was really important for me and my sense of identity and my sense of self. But I also met a couple guys who were really cool guys. They happened to be Christians, and they could go out to a bar, have a couple drinks, and go home. Meanwhile, I'd be staying out doing everything they weren't doing. Well, one day they invited me to their church service, and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll go. I used to know God, and I go to this church where the pastor is wearing skateboarding shoes and skateboarding shorts. I'm like, that's kind of interesting. About the third time I go, he preaches a sermon that outlines my life to a T. And as he was wrapping up, I felt like God spoke to me. And what I felt like he said to me, and this is going to sound strange to some, is that I was like lukewarm water. I wasn't hot or cold, and he was about to spit me out of his mouth. Now, some might be familiar with that because that's a direct analogy that's written in the Bible in the last book of the New Testament. But that was not something the pastor said that night, but I know that I read that when I was a kid. And what that did for me is it spiritually sobered me for a few seconds. That's not what changed my life, but if there's ever such a thing as being spiritually sober, that was it, where I began to see visually that over the last 6 years of my life that God basically let me do everything I wanted to do, and I pretty much got everything that I wanted. He didn't stop me. He didn't get in my way. He didn't send me to jail, and I should have been there many, many times. And then it just clicked. At no point during those last 6 years had I ever been as happy or as satisfied as I was when I was Lambert the Jesus Freak. So rewind a little bit. Before I left Indiana University, there was not a single Christian in my entire fraternity of 180 guys. Before I got back, my 3 best friends had all had these radical encounters with God. They had nothing to do with me. Plus my drug dealer, who was in jail for selling meth, he had this crazy spiritual encounter. He got out, I came back, we started this Bible study. We had 12 to 15 guys coming every week, and we were leading all these guys to Jesus. And I started thinking about my future, and I realized I don't want to go to law school and become a real estate developer. I just want to help people know God. And so, long story short, I ended up moving to California, studied seminary, and got ready to become a pastor. Then my wife and I moved to Africa for 9 months and did community development. I lived in a Muslim village in a mud hut with no running water. And then we started a church in the Detroit area in 2007, and then in 2010 started Life Remodeled. So for me, the motivation is spiritual. It's all about helping people connect with each other, no matter what their backgrounds may be, about religion, politics, pro-life, pro-choice, you name it. We want to help people connect with each other, and we want to make a tangible, and I want to make a tangible impact in the lives of people living in poverty. So that's why I am where I am.
Yeah, that's incredible.
It's been a wild ride.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
You got it. Thanks for asking.
Yeah. So, I guess for people listening, right, a big part of this show is that anybody that wants to start their own business or start their own organization, but doesn't really have the tools or the knowledge to do so, can find that information here. And that's why, I try to showcase as many different kinds of people as possible, whether they have started a restaurant or started some kind of product.
Yep.
So you have started this organization. It's a nonprofit organization. So for somebody wanting to start a nonprofit in the city, what kind of advice would you give them?
Well, my journey has been full of twists and turns. I never expected to lead a nonprofit. Before that, I never expected to lead a church, right? And so a lot of these things just came out of a desire to make an impact and then doing what needed to be done to get it done. And so when it came to this nonprofit in particular, it all started with a conversation that led me down a path where I realized there was an opportunity to help people who were living in poverty and to help bring people together, and that maybe I could come up with a way to do it. And the original vision that we set out with is very different than the strategy that we have right now. But I would say really important keys are surrounding yourselves with like-minded people. When I say like-minded, I don't mean that they think the same way as you or me on everything, but I mean they share a mutual passion, right, to what you're passionate about. And then finding the diverse skill sets of people that are necessary in order to bring something from an idea to launch. And so for me, nonprofit management is obviously very much about fundraising. That's something I've learned. And of course, that's true for every nonprofit. I hated fundraising with a passion. And I can say to anyone who's in the nonprofit world or thinking about starting up a nonprofit, that's probably common for most people that I've met. They can't stand it. And now I actually love fundraising because I've learned that it's something very different than what I used to think that it was. I used to think that it was a transaction because I was so used to seeing people kind of do that, put that sales pitch on, or that used cars salesman type. Not that that's bad to be a used car salesman or anything. But it just felt so forced, or it felt so manipulative. And what I've learned is that really I don't go into opportunities for fundraising for the sake of trying to get somebody to make a transaction, but I just sat down with a very wealthy person today at lunch just before this interview, and I just seek to get to know this person, right, for who they are and see how we can help each other become better people. And of course, if they have finances, I invite them to bring that to the table. But that's been one of the really important things that I've learned over the years is money doesn't lead, money follows. And I approach people as people rather than people as transactions or projects. And that's what's contributed to significant growth from the original conception of the idea to where we are now, not only in fundraising, but one of our core values is people over projects. Yeah. You always treat people like the most precious commodity on the planet. And sometimes that's very difficult to do in a startup culture because it's so complicated. There's so many things you don't know what you don't know. And you can often get stressed out to a point where you can step on people along the way or burn bridges. And that's another reason I would say surround yourself with people who are very relational and who can help you make sure you're staying to be that relational person and keep you accountable. But also surround yourselves with really ambitious go-getters who can put in work. And
just have a diverse team.
Diverse team, there you go.
Yeah.
So you said it a lot shorter and easier than I did.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. I've definitely noticed that. I think particularly with younger people, say like 18 to 28 or 30, like my age range, is there's a sense of like you gotta hustle, you gotta grind, and it doesn't matter who you step over to get to these goals and accomplishments. And that, I don't know, I have never been able to do that. So for people that have that mentality, how do they switch from that to becoming more relational?
It all comes down to identity, I would say, is a common factor of who are you and who or what defines you, right? So for me, obviously my faith plays a massive role in who I am and defining who I am. That's obviously going to look different for different people. But I know that I'm not defined by my work, and I'm going to tell you that's been a very hard struggle for me. It's something that I've had to battle through, and I've actually dealt with years of very severe anxiety attacks and whatnot because I struggled with trying to define myself by what I do, because usually entrepreneurs are very type A, not always, but very driven people, and I can identify with that because I like being driven. But I guess the corrective that I had to find along the way was learning that I'm not defined by this work. I'm defined by who I am, and for me, I define myself as a follower of Jesus and a son of God, and someone who's here I'm meant to love people above any project or any company or any venture that I'll ever start. And so that keeps me grounded to where it helps me remember the main thing being the main thing. And it helps me to live in the moment and to really be present with someone instead of always just being so obsessed about the next thing and the next thing. And I think that that's a very difficult temptation for any founder or entrepreneur, is we're always thinking about the future. And that's a great thing. I don't mean to talk badly about that. That's a gift. But it can eat you up and spit you out, and it can end up causing you to hurt a lot of people along the way. And those ventures don't really change culture for good. They just, maybe they make some money, but...
Yeah, a lot of people listen to respond and not listen to hear, which I feel like relates. So, being in this ecosystem of community development in Detroit, what are some other community development people or organizations that you find really inspiring that are doing great work in the city?
Yeah, absolutely. One of our board members is Alice Thompson, and she's often known as the Oprah of Detroit. She leads an organization called Black Family Development, which is the largest African-American-led nonprofit in the city. And I've just been amazed at how she's been so wise and so effective in developing a wide variety of relationships. Everyone that I know that knows Alice loves Alice. And so she's taught me a lot, and their work has taught me a lot about collaboration across a wide variety of sectors. And then just right down the road is Focus Hope, which is one of the premier nonprofits that's been around ever since 1967, when the uprising started right here in this neighborhood. And to see them evolve and change and grow and really focus on workforce development, among other things, has been inspiring. Among another leader named Lisa Johannan and Central Detroit Christian, which is, I think, one of the most dynamic nonprofits in Detroit, doing real hands-on community development work, whereby they have actually created 5 businesses along the way and trained up entrepreneurs to build wealth in that process, along with the other services they provide. So I think the ecosystem's incredible in Detroit, but what I think that we need to do more of is we need to connect more and collaborate more, which is what we're trying to do here. We're not trying to create programs as Life Remodeled. So we're not trying to compete with other nonprofits at all. In fact, what we want to do is help everybody be better together, everybody do what they do best and do it at a higher level. Because when you bring together all these great players in the nonprofit, the for-profit, all the other sectors, then you're going to see the needle move, and you're going to see the tangible results that we're all looking for, and everybody wins, right? And so that's the kind of ecosystem we want to help grow, that community, that camaraderie, that collaboration that I think Detroit has a lot of room to grow in.
I guess going back to the collaboration point, when you try to collaborate with a lot of people in Detroit, I've heard 2 things. People that are either very jaded or people that are very open. And one viewpoint is that, I'm trying to collaborate with all these different people, but people are very like staying in their point of view, and when they try to access the gatekeepers of the city who can really help people out, the gatekeepers are very shut off, as opposed to in other cities, they're very willing to help each other out. The other camp is, no, everybody here really wants to help each other out. Collaboration is easy, and the great thing about Detroit is it's a blank canvas, and really things have been happening here for years, and a lot of new things are happening here, and both of those parties are open to working with each other. So with that in mind, what kind of obstacles have you come across on your journey of building this organization, and what rings true with you?
So I just wanted to go back to that phrase that really popped out to me, the blank canvas phrase. And I think a lot of people say that in a well-meaning way. I don't use that phrase because it's not a blank canvas, right? There's so much history here in Detroit. There's great history, put the world on wheels, and we had the highest per capita income in 1960 of any city in the country, and there's a lot of other amazing arts and so many great things that have come out of Detroit, and of course there's many struggles that our city's been through as well. So I think you're going to find, of course, people all over that spectrum that you just mentioned, and in between, and even more extremes. And you got to obviously know how to work with what many people call old Detroit and new Detroit. And really, the mayor talks a lot about the fact that we really just need one Detroit, where we all learn to work together. So the best way to set yourself up to be able to collaborate with others is to just constantly be the kind of person that is what we call bold and humble, or we call it bold humility, to where you consider others better than yourselves, and you're always seeking to serve other people, but you're not a doormat at the same time, right? I mean, as an entrepreneur, you've got ideas, you've got important things to add to the ecosystem that people need to hear and need to see. But if you carry yourself with a chip on your shoulder, or with anger or frustration, you're not going to get through to anybody anywhere, right? At the same time, you don't just let somebody take your idea or run over your idea and say, get out of my way. You got to be bold. So in our experience, we found a mix, but for the most part, the collaboration has been amazing. But it's all about how you come at it. Often nonprofits, and this is true all around the country, look at resources as limited, and as if the pie is very limited, and as if we're in competition with each other because oh, if your nonprofit gets money, then that means maybe mine's not going to have as much. And what I believe is that's a false narrative, and that the pie actually can be a whole lot bigger if we learn how to play well together. Because a smart funder is going to want to give to an organization that is working with other organizations that are going to address the other issues that your organization is not addressing. Because even if your organization is the best in the world and you solve one issue or two or three, there's still a wide variety of other issues that may not be getting met where you're at. So I think if we learn how to collaborate, we're actually going to create more generosity from the business community, from the philanthropy community, from individual givers, as well as other avenues.
Yeah, cool. And then last question I'd like to end on is why Detroit?
So I lived in Los Angeles at the time that my wife and I felt called to Detroit. As I told you, I was born and raised in Indiana, and I never wanted to move back to the Midwest. I was done with it. I loved LA. I loved to surf, right? That was going to be home for the rest of my life. And again, it was a very spiritual sense of calling to Detroit, but to boil it down to two things I can explain. My wife and I were very passionate about being where there's a lot of diversity, and we're also very passionate about living where there's a lot of social need. Los Angeles had all that, but when we looked at Detroit compared to Los Angeles, we realized that the needs weren't being met anywhere near on the level that they were being met in Los Angeles. And we just felt like we were more needed in Detroit.
Right.
And so now I've come to love the city. I live in the city. I'm raising my kids in the city. 2 boys, you know, they're having an incredible journey. I wish I got to grow up the way they're getting to grow up in this multicultural experience. But we all talk about, you know, Detroit's the comeback city. But in reality, you know, we got 130 square miles outside downtown and Midtown that have a lot of work ahead of us. So I just want to call out to all your listeners, you know, if you're not already loving on Detroit, we'd love to have you and figure out how we can collaborate.
Yeah, I mean, on that note, tell people what you're working on now, what you're excited about, and how people can find you.
Yeah, so we're right here in the old library of this massive building that you're about to be one of our primary anchor tenants we're real excited about. But basically, we're turning this former school building into a community innovation center, which means that we're going to bring in tenants who are for-profit tenants and non-profit tenants. But to be a tenant here, you have to do at least one of 3 things. Either create real-world hands-on educational experiences for kids or adults, or 2, create workforce development opportunities or jobs, job training. Or the third thing, which is where the Jibs falls in, I love saying that now, is entrepreneurism. And so, I mean, I don't know if you've already talked about what you're looking to do, but what you're doing with your co-working space and what Rami Kochan's going to do with their social investment fund of $5 million and what other service providers are going to do is going to really help entrepreneurs be successful.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for listening, guys. Thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for telling your story and just sitting down for just a couple of minutes.
You got it. Yeah. Thanks, Jabron. Thanks all you guys listening out there.
Cool. Stay tuned. Thanks, man.
All right. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Thanks, bro. Well, I hope you get 1 million views and
that's the dream.
you're famous, but just don't leave Detroit.